Hey, welcome to another segment of Managing Information Systems. Hey, Billy, Cindy.
Hi, Professor Crane.
So today's topics include working with a 4-step process to resolve problems. Now check out the model that's available to you in the book. We'll also identify the problems, whether or not it's one problem or a cascade of problems, and where does the problem truly exist. In addition, how to evaluate a problem to develop and design a process within the system. Likewise, we'll analyze and develop solutions and select the most fitting in solving the problem. And we'll take a look at the implementation stage and develop feedback to ensure success. Are you alright, Billy?
Well, Professor Crane, since you asked, I just broke up with my girlfriend of 3 weeks.
Well, Billy, I'm really sorry to hear that.
That's okay. I ran into her this morning in the student parking lot.
Well, hey, Billy, did everything turn out okay? Are you starting to feel better?
Yeah, especially after I put my car in reverse and hit her again.
Okay, Billy. I'm glad you're feeling better. Let's move on and talk about how we can solve problems. In fact, Billy, you might find this subject matter to be very interesting. In talking about problem solving, we as managers will always continue to work on mastering the discipline. And it's no doubt that the situation calls for us to be patient, Billy, determined and considerate while formulating the right resolution to a particular situation. Wow, that sounds a little bit like what I do. Problem solving requires us to have tools to enable us to develop strategies, and it's essential that we have the right tool for the right problem. Now, the tools that I'm speaking about, it's relevant to the model that's in your book, as it allows us to standardize the methodology, but not necessarily the ideology. The methodology, well now, this allows us to approach a problem with a sense of structure that enables us to dismantle the problem. Likewise, we have to deploy our critical thinking side effectively in making decisions. And you know, those people that are very successful at this are very rare, in that they're able to consistently identify and choose the best option among multiple alternatives to resolve the problem.
I've learned that critical thinking allows me to take apart complex math problems to understand the inputs and implications of my own thought process.
Yeah, Cindy, when I do that, I learn to clarify problems in terms of objectives and issues, with a view associated with my dad's desired outcome.
You know, by applying these type of techniques that you both have mentioned, we'll begin to impose quality controls on our decisions, and as managers, the decisions of others. To maintain good decisions, we should have quality controls in our decision-making process.
Professor Crane, we should also acknowledge how to reason in making a sensible decision.
I'm sure what Billy meant is how to reason effectively and consistently, and involve analytical techniques for comparing alternative solutions.
You know, Cindy, we'll need to understand the problem from multiple perspectives while formulating a creative solution. In the beginning of our problem-solving process, the first thing we should do is,
Professor Crane, we should acknowledge what type of problem exists.
Absolutely, Billy. However, the problem often is overlooked, and usually because no one wants to take responsibility or people have no understanding of the cascade effects throughout the business process. Therefore, in my opinion, we should agree that the problem exists, and then take full ownership to enable us to begin the methodology of the 4-step process. Now, much in comparison to those managers who bet with the corporate wallet, there's always that one person who will develop the wildest ideas to implement a quick fix, and obviously it won't add much value to the organization. Now, in review to problem identification, requires us to do some research on the issue, describe associated problems, and analyze each individual issue in developing a solution.
It sounds to me like we need to actually see the problem to identify the issue and gather information to define associated issues before we begin to work on our solutions.
Professor Crane, I think Cindy is trying to say is that we need to determine the degree and the extent of the problem before we work on a solution.
Yes, you're both correct. While the process may seem to be simple, People often mistakenly identify the problem or even the source, which ultimately the problem becomes bigger than it needs to be. So one of the questions I normally ask in this stage is what keeps the organization from performing better? And of course we have other questions that we'll need to evaluate, and an example of this would be, do we have a supporting culture that will embrace change? And if we make change, will the task become too complex? The next stage, solution design, this is where we'll form a strategy to solve the problem. Now, of course, the approach that we would use would highly depend on the situation and, of course, the team's unique preferences. Now, before we come up with some particular solution, we'll need to first organize all the available information regarding the problems in an effort to answer the question, what do we know about the problem? Or what do we not know?
As I understand it, the more we identify with the problem, the more prepared we'll be to develop an accurate solution.
Absolutely, Cindy. And you know, other questions that the team will need answers to is how much money is available to fix the issue, what's our time frame, and what resources are available. Likewise, we'd want to determine priorities, thereby ensuring that we do have the right amount of resources available to us.
Professor Crane, would we not monitor our progress as we work towards a solution? Because we're not making good progress, would we not need to reevaluate our approach?
I like your thinking, Billy. We'll need to benchmark the entire progress throughout our project, which starts with identifying all the parameters of the problem in order to, well, identify the solution, much in comparisons to what Cindy had mentioned earlier. Now, in this stage, we'll again need to deploy our critical thinking in developing our ideas. As we move forward, we'll need to, well, decide what the issues are for us to resolve. Agree on who, what, and where the problem exists, and prioritize the project requirements relevant to the level of urgency. Now, in developing a solution, we'll want to identify the needs and the motivations of the organization and the end users. We got to remember, we got to keep the end users in the loop. Likewise, we'll want to generate as many ideas as possible and gather the team to brainstorm in finding a solution. Likewise, we should combine all the ideas from the brainstorm sessions, expand on these ideas, and of course, redefine them to meet the needs of the organization.
Okay, it's my understanding that we would need to create multiple drafts while seeking feedback from both our group and people within the organization, which would include the end user, correct?
Right again, Cindy. What we want is buy-in from everyone connected to the problem, before finalizing the design and, of course, before implementation. Likewise, we want our people and users to collaborate within the process to lessen the impact of creating change. Now, in this stage, we would present our selected ideas to upper management, the big bosses, to decide on what direction we go in. Again, Cindy, creating another buy-in. Now, we would create and present an actual working prototype illustrating all of the team's ideas. Entering into the solution evaluation and choice stage, the first thing that we'd want to do is review all our objectives associated to the issues.
Well, Professor Crane, if we're going to make a choice, we should set aside our emotions and ownership ideas.
I'd agree with that. And Billy, we should avoid consensus thinking, or better known as agreement seeking, as we really need to focus primarily on just the problem.
I've always been told that most practical solutions aren't always the best.
And because of that thought process, Cindy, we really need to select the most powerful ideas in meeting the team's criteria, objectives, and let's not forget, we need to ensure the goals of the organization. Now, it's at this point we really should be asking ourselves even more questions. For example, will the solution resolve the problem? How about this one? Will the solution meet or succeed the budget? And does the benefits outweigh the cost? Other questions we may want to know answers to is what's the return on the investment? What is the total cost of ownership? Now, if it's me and the solution meets the demands, well then, Cindy, it's possible that we have the right resolution. And moving forward into the next stage, implementation, now we'll need to record all the tasks involved in developing a plan of operation, purchase the required equipment, assign resources, provide training to our employees. Now, we may also want to provide employees with some sort of an incentive to gain support regarding the change. Upon completion, We would check for any quality issues and involve upper management from start to finish to ensure satisfaction, and not to mention the key word, partnership.
Professor Crane, wouldn't we also want to measure our success and failures?
Yep, and document all ongoing issues, develop a maintenance schedule, and direct resources assigned to the project, just to mention a few. After completing the implementation stage, we now move into the feedback stage, where we'd want and gather feedback from the end user and continue to ensure the solution meets the goals of the organization. Likewise, we would schedule meetings with the team to determine if the goals are continually met and discuss what more we could do or can be done to improve the system. I would think by now you're starting to realize that solution thinkers, well, they share a common set of values that drive innovation. These values are mainly creativity, critical thinking, teamwork, end-user focused, and most importantly, willing to do their best in satisfying the requirements of the organization. Well now, this ends our segment, but in our next segment, I'll provide you with some insight relevant to how corporations are using technology, systems, and information in the world in which we live in. We'll talk about customer relation management, inventory control, and marketing campaigns. Until then, you be safe, have a great day, and thank you for joining us.